Marcus wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag, watching the clock on his garage wall tick past 9 in the evening. Another long day fixing engines and transmissions in his small auto shop on the outskirts of town. The rain had been pounding against the metal roof all afternoon, creating a steady drumming that usually helped him focus on his work. Tonight, however, something felt different about the storm. He had inherited this garage from his uncle 3 years ago, along with a small apartment above it. The building sat alone on a quiet street, surrounded by empty lots and abandoned warehouses. Most people avoided this part of town after dark, which suited Marcus just fine. He preferred the solitude and the honest work of fixing things that were broken. As he prepared to lock up for the night, a flash of lightning illuminated the street outside. Through the rain-streaked window, he saw two figures stumbling toward his garage. They appeared to be young women, soaked to the bone and moving with obvious exhaustion. One was supporting the other, who seemed barely able to walk. Marcus hesitated for a moment. He had always been cautious about strangers, especially in this neighborhood. But something about their desperate situation stirred his conscience. He had never been able to turn away from someone who needed help. Opening the heavy garage door, he called out over the storm, "Hey, you two need shelter." The taller of the two women looked up, her long black hair plastered to her face by the rain. Even in the dim light, Marcus could see her striking features and unusual golden eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. Her companion appeared younger, with silver-white hair and similar golden eyes, though hers were clouded with pain and exhaustion. "Please," the dark-haired woman said, her voice carrying a strange accent he couldn't place. "My sister is injured. We just need somewhere warm and dry for the night." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Come on in quickly." He gestured them into the garage, then pulled the door shut against the driving rain. The sudden silence felt almost overwhelming after the constant noise of the storm. In the fluorescent light of his workspace, Marcus got his first good look at the two women. They were both young, probably in their early 20s, and despite their bedraggled appearance, there was something almost regal about the way they carried themselves. Their clothes were strange, too, what looked like fine fabric cut in an old-fashioned style, now torn and stained from their journey. "I'm Marcus," he said, grabbing some clean shop towels from a cabinet. "Here, these will help you dry off a bit." The dark-haired woman accepted the towels gratefully. "I am Lyra, and this is my sister Vera. We are in your debt for this kindness." Vera swayed on her feet, and Marcus quickly moved to help support her. As his hand touched her arm, he was surprised by how warm her skin felt, almost feverish. "She needs medical attention," he said. "There's a hospital about 20 minutes from here." "No," Lyra said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "No hospitals. She will recover with rest and warmth. We just need until morning." Marcus studied them both carefully. There was definitely something unusual about these two, but he couldn't put his finger on what it was. Their eyes held an ancient quality that seemed at odds with their apparent youth. And there was the way they spoke, formal, precise, as if English wasn't their first language. The apartment upstairs has a couch and a spare bedroom, he offered. "You're welcome to stay the night. I can make some soup or tea to help warm you up." Vera spoke for the first time, her voice weak but melodious. "You are very kind, Marcus. We will not forget this generosity." Marcus led them up the narrow stairs to his apartment, which was modest but clean. The living room had a comfortable couch and an old television, while the kitchen was small but functional. He had always lived simply, spending most of his money on tools and equipment for the garage rather than luxuries for himself. "Sit down, please," he said, gesturing to the couch. "I'll get you something dry to wear and start some tea." He rummaged through his dresser, finding a couple of old T-shirts and sweatpants that would be too large but warm. When he returned to the living room, he found the sisters speaking to each other in a language he had never heard before. The words seemed to flow like music, with sounds that human throats shouldn't have been able to make. They fell silent when they noticed him, and Lyra smiled apologetically. "Family language," she explained. "Old habits." As they changed into the dry clothes, Marcus busied himself in the kitchen, heating water for tea and opening a can of soup. Through the window, he could see the storm was intensifying, with lightning flashing almost continuously across the sky. Whatever these women's story was, they wouldn't be traveling anywhere tonight. When he brought the tea and soup to the living room, he noticed that Vera was looking much better. The color had returned to her face, and she no longer seemed to be struggling with pain. It was remarkable how quickly she had recovered from what had appeared to be a serious condition. "Feeling better?" he asked, setting the tray on the coffee table. "Much better, thank you," Vera replied, her voice now strong and clear. "Your kindness has healing properties." Marcus raised an eyebrow at the unusual phrasing, but said nothing. He settled into the armchair across from them, nursing his own cup of tea and trying to figure out his unexpected guests. "So what brings you to this part of town in the middle of a storm?" he asked. "Not exactly a tourist destination." Lyra and Vera exchanged a look that Marcus couldn't interpret. "We were traveling," Lyra said carefully. "Our transportation failed, and we became lost in the storm. We are fortunate to have found your establishment. Where were you headed? Maybe I can give you directions in the morning." Another exchanged glance. "We are searching for someone," Vera said. "A person of great importance to our family who has been missing for some time." Marcus sensed there was much more to the story, but he didn't press. Everyone had their secrets, and these two clearly had theirs. As long as they weren't dangerous, he was content to provide shelter without demanding explanations. The conversation continued for another hour, touching on safe topics like the weather and the local area. Marcus found himself surprisingly comfortable with his guests, despite their mysterious nature. There was something calming about their presence, and their gratitude for his simple hospitality was genuine and touching. As the night wore on, Vera began to nod off on the couch. Lyra gently shook her sister awake. "You should rest properly," she said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Marcus showed Vera to the spare bedroom, then returned to find Lyra still sitting in the living room, staring out at the storm. "The couch pulls out into a bed," he offered. "Should be comfortable enough." "You are too generous," Lyra said. "We have already imposed far too much." "Nonsense. It's just for one night, and it's not like I was using the spare room anyway." Marcus paused, studying her profile in the dim light. "Can I ask you something?" Lyra turned to face him, her golden eyes reflecting the occasional lightning flash. "Of course. This might sound strange, but you and your sister don't seem entirely human. I mean, you look human, but there's something different. The way you speak, the way you move, even the way you look at things. It's like you're from somewhere very far away." Lyra was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus wondered if he had offended her. Finally, she smiled, and there was something sad in her expression. "You are very perceptive, Marcus. We are indeed from somewhere far away, farther than you might imagine." She stood up, moving to the window to watch the lightning. "Our people have always lived apart from humans, though not by choice. We have our own lands, our own customs, our own ways of life. What happened to bring you here?" "Family matters," she said simply. "Complex political situations that you would find difficult to understand. Sometimes those in power make decisions that affect everyone, even those who wish to remain uninvolved." Marcus nodded, though he didn't fully understand. "Well, whatever the situation is, you're safe here tonight. And if you need help in the morning, directions, supplies, whatever, just ask." Lyra turned from the window, and for a moment Marcus thought he saw something shift in her features, as if her human appearance was just a mask that had briefly slipped. But in the next instant, she looked perfectly normal again. "You truly are a rare individual, Marcus. Most humans would demand explanations, would be suspicious of strangers appearing in the night. Your trust is a precious gift. I've learned that most people are just trying to get by, same as me. Whatever your story is, you don't seem like the type to cause harm to anyone." "No," Lyra said softly. "We would never harm you. In fact, your safety is now a matter of great importance to us." Before Marcus could ask what she meant by that, Lyra had moved to the couch and was pulling out the bed. "Please get your rest." Tomorrow you must return to your work, and we will continue our journey." Marcus wished her good night and headed to his own bedroom, but sleep was slow to come. His mind kept turning over the strange events of the evening. The mysterious sisters, their unusual speech patterns, their apparent rapid recovery from injury, and, most of all, Lyra's cryptic comments about his safety being important to them. Around 3 in the morning, he was awakened by voices from the living room. The sisters were speaking again in their musical language, and though he couldn't understand the words, there was an urgency to their conversation that made him uneasy. He crept to his bedroom door and listened, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. Occasionally, he caught a word that sounded almost familiar, as if it might be related to some ancient language he had studied in school. But mostly it was unlike anything he had ever heard. The conversation went on for nearly an hour before falling silent. Marcus lay awake for the rest of the night, wondering what he had gotten himself into by offering shelter to these strange women. When morning came, the storm had passed, leaving behind a clear sky and the fresh scent of rain-washed air. Marcus made coffee and prepared a simple breakfast, then went to check on his guests. The spare bedroom was empty, the bed neatly made. In the living room, he found both sisters fully dressed in their original clothes, which had somehow been cleaned and repaired overnight. They were standing by the window, looking out at the street with expressions of concentration. "Good morning," Marcus said. "How did you sleep?" "Very well, thank you," Vera replied, though she looked as if she had been awake for hours. "You have provided us with exactly what we needed." Lyra turned from the window. "Marcus, we must speak with you about something important. Please sit down." The serious tone in her voice made Marcus's stomach tighten with apprehension. He settled into his armchair, coffee cup in hand, and waited for whatever revelation was coming. "Last night, you asked if we were human," Lyra began. "The truth is, we are not. We are what your people might call dragons, though that term carries many misconceptions." Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. "Dragons? As in fire-breathing, wing-having dragons?" "We are shapeshifters," Vera explained gently. "We can take human form when necessary, but our true nature is quite different. We come from a realm that exists parallel to your world, accessible through certain gates during specific conditions." Marcus stared at them, waiting for the punchline or some indication that this was an elaborate joke. When neither came, he set down his coffee cup with shaking hands. "You're serious. You're actually telling me you're dragons." "We understand your disbelief," Lyra said, "but consider the evidence you observed last night. Vera's rapid recovery from injury, our unusual speech patterns, the way we seem different from other humans you have known. This is—" Marcus struggled to process the information. "This is impossible. Dragons don't exist." "We exist," Vera said simply, "as do many other beings your world has forgotten or dismissed as mythology. We have remained hidden by choice, living in our own realm and rarely interacting with humans." "Then why are you here? Why tell me this?" Lyra and Vera exchanged another of their meaningful looks. "Because last night, by offering us shelter and showing us kindness without expecting anything in return, you became involved in something much larger than you realize." Marcus felt his heart rate increasing. "Involve how?" "Our father is the emperor of our realm," Vera said. "He rules over all dragon clans and territories. We are his daughters, though we disagree with many of his policies and have chosen to leave our home to search for alternatives. When we fail to return by tonight, he will assume we have been captured or killed," Lyra continued. "He will send search parties into the human world, and eventually they will trace our path to your garage." Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "So you're telling me that I helped 2 runaway dragon princesses, and now their emperor father is going to come looking for them here?" "Yes," Vera said, "though when he discovers that you helped us voluntarily, without knowing our identity, he will be very interested in meeting you." "Interested how? In a good way or a bad way?" "That," Lyra said, "remains to be seen. Our father is a complex individual with strong opinions about humans. Your actions toward us will certainly influence his judgment. Marcus sank back into his chair, his mind reeling. This is insane. Yesterday, I was just a mechanic who fixed cars. Now I'm supposedly involved in dragon politics. We are sorry, Vera said sincerely. We had hoped to be gone by morning before any complications arose. But the storm delayed our departure, and now it may be too late to avoid the consequences. What kind of consequences are we talking about? That depends entirely on our father's mood when he arrives, Lyra said. He might be grateful for your kindness to his daughters, or he might be suspicious of your motives and view you as a potential threat to our safety. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a massive headache. And there's no way to just explain the situation? Send him a message that you're fine and I'm not a threat. Communication between realms is difficult and time-consuming, Vera explained. By the time any message could reach him, he will already be on his way here. How long do we have? If he follows standard protocol, search parties will begin investigating within 24 hours of our expected return time, Lyra said. Since we were supposed to return last night, they are probably already mobilizing. Marcus felt his world tilting on its axis. Everything he thought he knew about reality was being turned upside down, and he was apparently about to meet a dragon emperor who might or might not consider him a threat to his daughter's safety. Is there anything I can do to prepare? I mean, what should I expect when he gets here? Be yourself, Vera advised. Your genuine nature is what impressed us. Any attempt to pretend to be something you're not will be immediately detected. Dragons are excellent judges of character, Lyra added. Our father will know within moments whether you are trustworthy or not. Marcus looked at the two women, dragons, sitting in his living room as if this were the most normal conversation in the world. Despite the impossibility of the situation, he found himself believing them. Too many small details from the previous night, suddenly, made sense when viewed through this new lens. So what happens now? He asked. Do we just sit here and wait for the Dragon Emperor to show up in my garage? We wait, Lyra confirmed. And we prepare you as best we can for what is coming. Because Marcus, willing or not, you are about to become a part of something much larger than your small human world. The next 18 hours passed in a strange state of suspended reality for Marcus. Lyra and Vera remained in his apartment, taking turns keeping watch at the windows while explaining more about their world and their father's empire. Marcus learned that dragons lived for thousands of years, that they possessed abilities far beyond human comprehension, and that their realm existed in a space between dimensions that could only be accessed through ancient gates. Our father has ruled for over 3 millennia, Vera explained as they sat around his small kitchen table. He united the scattered dragon clans after a devastating war with beings from another realm. Under his leadership, our people have known unprecedented peace and prosperity. So why did you leave? Marcus asked. It sounds like a pretty good situation. Lyra's expression darkened. Peace came at a price. Our father's policies have become increasingly isolationist over the centuries. He forbids contact with humans, prohibits exploration of other realms, and maintains strict control over every aspect of dragon society. We believe that isolation will ultimately lead to stagnation and decline, Vera added. There is much we could learn from other species, much we could teach them in return. But our father sees only the potential for conflict and betrayal. Marcus absorbed this information while trying to maintain some semblance of normal routine. He opened his garage, as usual, though he found it difficult to concentrate on the simple mechanical problems that had once been his primary concern. Every sound from the street made him look up, expecting to see something impossible approaching his building. Will I know when he's coming? He asked during a break from pretending to work. Oh, you will definitely know, Lyra said with a slight smile. Our father does not believe in subtle entrances. As evening approached, Marcus found himself growing increasingly nervous. He had changed clothes 3 times, cleaned his apartment obsessively, and even considered shaving his week-old beard before deciding that looking too formal might seem suspicious. Stop worrying, Vera advised, watching him pace around the living room. Your nervous energy will not improve the situation. Easy for you to say. You're his daughter. The worst he'll do to you is maybe ground you for a few centuries. I could end up as a pile of ash. Our father has not executed anyone in over 1,000 years, Lyra said, though there was that incident with the merchant who tried to cheat him. Lyra, Vera said sharply. That is not helpful. What incident? Marcus demanded. Never mind, Lyra said quickly. That situation was completely different. The merchant was actively trying to steal from our treasury. Marcus was about to ask for more details when the air in the room suddenly became thick and heavy, charged with an energy that made his skin tingle. The lights flickered, and he could hear a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He is here, Vera said quietly, moving to stand beside her sister. The humming grew louder, and Marcus felt a pressure in his ears as if he were ascending rapidly in an airplane. Through the windows, he could see that the street lights were flickering and the few remaining trees were bending as if caught in a powerful wind, though he could see no movement in the air. Then, with a sound like thunder rolling across the sky, something massive landed in the empty lot across from his garage. Marcus rushed to the window and felt his knees go weak at what he saw. The creature was enormous, easily the size of a commercial airliner, with scales that seemed to shift between deep emerald and midnight black in the streetlight. Its wings, now folded against its body, had blocked out half the visible sky during its descent. Two enormous golden eyes, each larger than Marcus himself, turned toward the building where he stood. That's your father? He whispered. In his true form, yes, Lyra replied. He will shift to human appearance before entering. It would be quite impractical otherwise. As if responding to her words, the massive dragon began to shimmer and contract, its form becoming less distinct. Within moments, where the enormous creature had been, a man now stood in the empty lot. Even at a distance, Marcus could see that he was tall and imposing, with the same unusual golden eyes as his daughter's. He is coming up, Vera announced, though Marcus couldn't see how she knew this. Moments later, there was a firm knock at the door leading to the apartment. Not a desperate pounding or an aggressive banging, just 3 measured knocks that somehow conveyed more authority than any amount of force could have. Marcus looked at the sisters, who both nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, he walked to the door and opened it. The man standing in his doorway was perhaps 60 years old in human terms, with silver-streaked black hair and a bearing that immediately commanded respect. He wore a long coat that looked expensive but not ostentatious, and his golden eyes held an intelligence that seemed to look right through Marcus. You are the mechanic, the Dragon Emperor said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. Marcus Thompson. He stepped aside, gesturing for the Emperor to enter. Please come in. The Emperor stepped into the apartment, and Marcus immediately felt the space shrink around his presence. It wasn't that the man was physically enormous. He was tall, but not unusually so, but there was something about him that seemed to fill any room he occupied. Father, Lyra said, stepping forward. We can explain everything. The Emperor held up a hand, and she fell silent. His gaze remained fixed on Marcus, studying him with an intensity that made Marcus feel like a specimen under a microscope. You offered shelter to 2 strangers in the night, the Emperor said, without payment, without questions, without demanding explanations for their unusual appearance or circumstances. They needed help, Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. It was raining, one of them was hurt. It seemed like the right thing to do. The right thing, the Emperor repeated thoughtfully. And when they revealed their true nature to you, what was your reaction? Marcus glanced at Lyra and Vera, who were watching the exchange with obvious tension. Honestly, I thought they might be crazy at first, but then I looked at all the little details from the night before, and it started to make sense. And even if I hadn't believed them, it wouldn't have changed anything. I'd already offered to help. The Emperor moved further into the room, examining Marcus's modest belongings with apparent interest. He paused at the bookshelf, running a finger along the spines of well-worn volumes on mechanical engineering, history, and classic literature. You live simply, he observed. I have what I need, Marcus said. I've never seen much point in accumulating things for their own sake. And your work? You repair mechanical devices. Cars, trucks, sometimes farm equipment. Anything with an engine, really. People depend on their vehicles, and I help keep them running. The Emperor turned back to face him. You provide a service that others need, you ask for fair payment in return, and you take satisfaction in solving problems through skill and knowledge. That's about the size of it, yes. Father, Vera interjected, Marcus has been nothing but kind to us. He deserves an explanation of why you are here. The Emperor's attention shifted to his daughters for the first time since entering the apartment. Indeed. Perhaps you would care to explain why you disappeared from the court without permission, why you missed your scheduled return, and why I had to mobilize search teams to locate you in the human realm. Lyra straightened her shoulders. We left because we disagree with your policies regarding human contact. We believe that continued isolation will harm our people in the long run. And you thought the appropriate response was to simply vanish without discussion. We have tried discussion for decades, Vera said. You refused to consider any alternative viewpoints. We wanted to see the human world for ourselves, to form our own opinions based on experience rather than ancient prejudices. The Emperor's expression remained carefully neutral, but Marcus could sense the tension in the room increasing. And what conclusions have you drawn from your experience? That humans are far more complex and capable than you have led us to believe, Lyra said. Marcus is proof of that. He showed us kindness without expecting anything in return, accepted our true nature without fear or hostility, and is now facing potential danger because of his association with us. The Emperor turned back to Marcus. Is this your assessment as well? That my daughter's presence here has created potential danger for you? Marcus considered the question carefully. I won't pretend I'm not nervous about this whole situation. Yesterday, my biggest worry was whether I had enough parts in stock to fix Mrs. Henderson's transmission. Now I'm apparently involved in interdimensional politics. But your daughters didn't force me to help them. I made that choice freely, and I'd make it again. Even knowing what you know now about their identity and the complications it might bring, even knowing that. The Emperor studied Marcus for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He smiled, and the transformation was remarkable. The stern, intimidating ruler was replaced by someone who looked genuinely pleased. My daughters have chosen their human representative well, he said. Your character is exactly as they described. Marcus blinked in confusion. I'm sorry, what? Vera laughed, and the sound was like music. Father, you're confusing him. Perhaps we should explain, Lyra suggested. The Emperor gestured toward the couch and chairs. Indeed. Please let us sit. This conversation may take some time. As they settled into the living room, Marcus noticed that the Emperor's presence no longer felt overwhelming. The intimidating aura had been replaced by something warmer, more approachable. Marcus, the Emperor began, my daughters did not leave the court impulsively. Their departure was part of a carefully planned test. A test. For many years, Lyra and Vera have argued that dragons should establish peaceful contact with humans. They believe our species could benefit from cooperation and mutual understanding. I, as they mentioned, have been skeptical of such proposals. Vera leaned forward. So Father devised a challenge. We were to enter the human world, alone and without resources, and see if we could find humans worthy of trust and respect. The test was whether humans would show kindness to strangers without expecting reward, Lyra added. Whether they would accept our true nature without fear or greed, and whether they would stand by their principles even when faced with potential consequences. Marcus felt his world spinning again. So this was all planned? The storm, your injury, everything. The storm was real, the Emperor assured him, as was Vera's exhaustion from maintaining human form for an extended period. But we did arrange for them to be in this area when the weather turned dangerous. Your garage was not chosen randomly, Vera admitted. Father's agents have been monitoring this region for months, identifying humans who might be suitable for contact. Your reputation for honesty and your willingness to help others made you a candidate for the test. Marcus looked around at the 3 dragons in his living room, trying to process this latest revelation. So, I was basically being auditioned for what exactly? To be our first official human ambassador, the Emperor said. If such a position were to be created, the implications of that statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. Ambassador? Me? I fix cars for a living. I don't know anything about diplomacy or politics, or whatever ambassadors are supposed to do. Perhaps that is exactly why you would be effective at it, the Emperor suggested. You understand the value of honest work, fair dealing, and practical solutions to problems. These are qualities that would serve well in building bridges between our peoples. Lyra nodded enthusiastically. You showed us that humans are capable of the kind of genuine kindness that makes cooperation possible. You proved that not all humans would see dragons as enemies to be feared or resources to be exploited. But I don't even know if I want this job, Marcus protested. I have a life here, a business. I can't just drop everything to become an interdimensional diplomat. No decision needs to be made immediately, the Emperor said. This conversation is merely the beginning of a much longer process. If you are interested in such a role, there would be extensive preparation, training, and gradual introduction to our world and its customs. And if I'm not interested, then you return to your normal life, with our gratitude for the kindness you show to my daughters, and a much more interesting story than most humans ever experience. Marcus rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of an impossible decision settling on his shoulders. Can I ask why this matters so much? Why now, after thousands of years of staying hidden? The Emperor's expression grew serious. Because our isolation is no longer sustainable. There are forces in other realms that view both dragons and humans as threats or resources to be conquered. We face challenges that neither of our species can handle alone. What kind of forces? Beings from dimensions where cooperation is unknown, where strength is the only virtue, and weakness is eliminated without mercy. They have been probing the barriers between realms for centuries, seeking entry points to our reality. Vera's voice was grim. They destroyed the realm of the Crystal Singers 300 years ago, an entire species extinct because they refused to submit to conquest. And you think working together would make both our species stronger? Marcus asked. I believe it is our only hope for long-term survival, the Emperor said. Dragons possess power and longevity, but humans have innovation and adaptability. Together, we might create defenses that neither species could develop alone. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the empty lot where a dragon the size of a building had landed less than an hour ago. The normalcy of the street scene. A few parked cars, a street light with a flickering bulb, an old dog wandering between the warehouses, seemed surreal after everything he had learned. This is a lot to take in, he said finally. Of course it is, the Emperor replied. We are asking you to consider reshaping your entire understanding of reality and your place in it. What would happen in my garage? My customers depend on me. If you chose to accept the ambassador role, arrangements could be made to maintain your business or transfer it to someone trustworthy, Lyra said. We would not ask you to simply abandon your responsibilities. Marcus turned back to face them. And what about the dangers you mentioned? These beings from other dimensions. Any human who becomes involved in interdimensional affairs will face certain risks, the Emperor acknowledged. But hiding from danger does not eliminate it. Eventually, these forces will find entry points to your world whether we cooperate or not. At least working together gives us a chance to prepare, Vera added. Marcus returned to his chair, his mind racing with questions and implications he couldn't even begin to sort out. How long do I have to decide? There is no deadline, the Emperor said, though I should mention that your involvement in this affair has already been noted by certain parties in our realm. Your safety may be better ensured if you remain under our protection. What do you mean, my involvement has been noted? Lyra and Vera exchanged a worried glance. Some members of the Dragon Court oppose any contact with humans, Lyra explained. They view our father's test as dangerous folly, and any humans involved as potential security threats. Are you saying I'm in danger just because I helped you too? Potentially, the Emperor said honestly. Though any threat to you would constitute a direct challenge to my authority, which few would dare to attempt. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. So my choices are to become an interdimensional ambassador or spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder for hostile dragons. Not necessarily, Vera said quickly. Father has considerable influence, and most of our people respect his judgment. If he declares you under his protection, few would dare to challenge that. But accepting the ambassador position would provide additional security, the Emperor added, as well as giving you some degree of agency in shaping future relations between our species. Marcus laughed, though there was little humor in it. 24 hours ago, I was worried about whether I could afford new tools for the garage. Now I'm apparently choosing between normalcy and becoming the first human ambassador to the Dragon Empire. Life rarely offers convenient timing for momentous decisions, the Emperor observed. Can I at least see your world before I decide? I mean, if I'm going to represent humans in diplomatic relations with dragons, shouldn't I know what I'm getting into? The Emperor smiled again, and Marcus was struck by how much warmth the expression added to his stern features. That is a very reasonable request. In fact, I would insist on it. Any decision made without adequate information is likely to be regretted later. When would this visit happen? The portal that brought us here will remain stable for another 48 hours, Lyra said. You could accompany us when we return, spend some time in our realm, and return here to make your decision. What about my garage? I have appointments scheduled for the rest of the week. Time flows differently between our realms, the Emperor explained. You could spend several days with us, and return to find that only a few hours have passed in your world. Marcus stared at him. Seriously? Seriously. The portal exists in a space between dimensions where temporal flow is variable. We can adjust the relative time differential to ensure your absence is not noticed. The practical part of Marcus's mind, the part that dealt with broken engines and concrete problems, rebelled against accepting such impossible concepts. But the evidence was sitting in his living room in the form of 3 shape-shifting dragons discussing interdimensional travel as casually as he might talk about driving to the next town. If I go with you and decide I don't want the job, you'll bring me back here and leave me alone? You have my word, the Emperor said solemnly. Though I should warn you that seeing our world tends to change humans' perspectives on many things. You may find it difficult to return to your previous life unchanged. In what way? Vera's eyes took on a dreamy quality. Our realm has wonders that human language cannot adequately describe. Floating cities held aloft by crystallized music, forests where the trees grow from clouds instead of soil, mountains that exist in 7 dimensions simultaneously. And the dragons themselves, Lyra added. You have only seen 3 of us, and only Father in his true form. Our people are as diverse as humans, with abilities and perspectives shaped by millennia of experience. The Emperor leaned forward. But, perhaps most importantly, you would see the challenges we face. The degradation of certain dimensional barriers, the evidence of incursions from hostile realms, the preparations we are making for conflicts that may be unavoidable. You would understand why we believe cooperation between our species is not just beneficial, but necessary, Vera concluded. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to imagine floating cities and 7-dimensional mountains, and failing completely. The rational part of his mind insisted this was all an elaborate hallucination brought on by stress or carbon monoxide poisoning from his garage. But the evidence of his senses, the consistency of the dragon's explanations, and the fundamental sincerity he sensed from all 3 of them made denial impossible. Okay, he said, opening his eyes. I'll go with you. But I want to be clear that I'm not committing to anything beyond taking a look around and learning more about the situation. Understood, The Emperor said, though I suspect you will find the experience more engaging than you anticipate. When do we leave? Tomorrow evening, Lyra said. The portal requires time to recharge between major transits, and we should give you opportunity to make arrangements for your absence. What kind of arrangements? Close your garage for a few days. Perhaps inform any friends or family that you will be out of town, Vera suggested. Though, as Father mentioned, very little time will pass here while you are away. Marcus nodded slowly. I can do that. Mrs. Henderson will have to wait a bit longer for her transmission, but I suppose that's a small price to pay for interdimensional tourism. The Emperor stood, and the others followed suit. Then we have an accord. Tomorrow evening, Marcus Thompson, you will become the first human in recorded history to visit the Dragon Empire as an honored guest rather than a prisoner or enemy. As the implications of that statement sank in, Marcus realized that no matter what he ultimately decided about the ambassador position, his life would never be the same again. Marcus spent the next day in a state of surreal preparation for a journey that shouldn't have been possible. He called his regular customers to reschedule their appointments, claiming a family emergency that required him to leave town for several days. The lie sat uncomfortably with him, but he couldn't exactly explain that he was taking a business trip to another dimension. Lyra and Vera remained in his apartment, occasionally disappearing for hours at a time to make their own preparations. Marcus didn't ask where they went, though he suspected they were communicating with their father or others in their realm. The Emperor himself had departed shortly after their conversation the previous night, promising to return when the portal was ready. As evening approached, Marcus found himself growing increasingly nervous. He had packed a small bag with clothes and personal items, though Vera had warned him that human possessions might not function properly in their realm due to different physical laws. The basic principles remain the same, she had explained, but the interaction between matter and energy follows different patterns. Your clothing should be fine, but electronic devices may behave strangely or stop working entirely. Marcus had decided to leave his phone behind, along with his watch and anything else that depended on delicate mechanisms. It felt oddly liberating to prepare for travel without the usual array of modern gadgets. Just after sunset, the air in his apartment began to thicken with the same charged energy he had felt the night before. Through his windows, he could see the empty lot across the street beginning to glow with a soft, shifting light that reminded him of the aurora borealis. The portal is forming, Lyra announced, moving to stand by the window. Father will be here shortly. Marcus joined her at the window and watched as the glow intensified into a swirling vortex of light and shadow. The portal was roughly circular, perhaps 20 feet in diameter, and seemed to exist slightly above the ground. Through its shifting surface, he could catch glimpses of what lay beyond, a landscape of impossible beauty that made his eyes water when he tried to focus on the details. Is it safe to look at? He asked, stepping back from the window. Safe enough, Vera replied, though prolonged observation can be disorienting for humans. Your visual processing system isn't designed to interpret the kind of spatial relationships you're seeing. A few moments later, the Emperor emerged from the portal, once again in human form. He crossed the street and climbed the stairs to Marcus's apartment, his arrival announced by a gentle knock rather than the overwhelming presence Marcus had expected. Are you ready? He asked when Marcus opened the door. Marcus hefted his small travel bag, as ready as someone can be for their first trip to another dimension, I suppose. The Emperor smiled. The first transition is always the most difficult. After that, interdimensional travel becomes almost routine. They descended to the street level, where Marcus got his first close look at the portal. The swirling energies were even more mesmerizing from this angle, and he could feel a subtle pull toward the opening, as if the very air around it was flowing into the vortex. The passage itself takes only moments, Lyra explained, taking his arm to guide him forward. You may experience some disorientation, but it will pass quickly. What should I expect? Imagine falling and flying at the same time, Vera said, while all of your senses tell you that up and down have lost their meaning. Try not to fight the sensation. Just let it carry you through. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. And if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong, the Emperor assured him. This portal has been used thousands of times without incident. Portal travel is actually much safer than your human automobiles. Before Marcus could respond to that somewhat backhanded reassurance, Lyra was leading him toward the swirling vortex. As they approached the edge, he could feel the air itself changing, becoming thicker and somehow more alive. Together, the Emperor said, moving to flank Marcus on the other side. Step through on my count. 3, 2, 1. Marcus stepped forward into the portal and immediately understood what Vera had meant about falling and flying simultaneously. His body seemed to lose all weight, while his inner ear insisted he was tumbling through space. Colors that had no names flashed around him, and he could hear sounds like distant music mixed with the roar of ocean waves. The sensation lasted only seconds, but felt like hours. Then suddenly his feet touched solid ground, his weight returned, and the disorientation began to fade. He found himself standing on what appeared to be a platform made of crystallized starlight, surrounded by a landscape that defied every assumption he had ever made about how worlds should look. The sky above was a deep violet color, dotted with 2 moons and what appeared to be a small sun that cast everything in a warm, golden light. In the distance, he could see the floating cities Vera had mentioned, structures of impossible grace and beauty that hung in the air without any visible means of support. Closer at hand, the landscape was equally extraordinary. Trees with silver bark and leaves that shimmered like water grew from soil that seemed to be made of crushed gemstones. Flowers that glowed with their own inner light dotted meadows where the grass appeared to be made of strands of colored light rather than ordinary vegetation. "Welcome to the heart of the Dragon Empire," the Emperor said, his voice filled with obvious pride. "This is the nexus where all the major portals converge, and our capital city is located." Marcus turned slowly, trying to take in the full scope of what he was seeing. I don't have words for this." "Few humans would," Vera said gently. "Your language evolved to describe a single dimension with limited magical properties. Our reality requires new vocabulary." "The platform we are standing on is called a portal anchor," Lyra explained. "It serves as a stable point for interdimensional travel and provides protection for visitors who might be overwhelmed by direct exposure to our environment." As his eyes adjusted to the strange light, Marcus began to notice details that were even more remarkable than the general landscape. Birds that appeared to be made of living flame flew between the floating cities, leaving trails of golden fire in their wake. In the distance, he could see what looked like a waterfall flowing upward from a lake into the sky, where it formed clouds that rained liquid starlight. "How is any of this possible?" he asked. "Your universe operates according to certain physical laws that limit what matter and energy can do," the Emperor explained. "Our realm exists in a space where those laws are more flexible. Magic, as you might call it, is simply the application of principles that don't exist in your dimension. Dragons are naturally attuned to these principles," Vera added. "We can manipulate the underlying forces that shape reality, which is why we appear to have supernatural abilities when we visit your world." A movement in the sky caught Marcus's attention, and he looked up to see a dragon approaching the platform. This one was smaller than the Emperor's true form, with scales that shifted between blue and green, and it moved through the air with a grace that reminded him of dolphins swimming through water. The dragon landed on the platform with surprising delicacy and immediately began to shimmer and contract, taking on human form. When the transformation was complete, a woman stood before them, appearing to be in her 30s with dark green hair and the same golden eyes that seemed to be universal among dragons. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing deeply to the Emperor, "the Council has been informed of your arrival and the presence of our human guest. They request an audience at your convenience." "Thank you, Stella," the Emperor replied. "Please inform them that we will attend the Council session tomorrow evening." Tonight, I wish to show our guest the city and allow him to rest and adjust to our environment. Stella's golden eyes fixed on Marcus with obvious curiosity. This is the human who aided the princesses? Marcus Thompson, the Emperor said formally. Marcus, this is Stella, one of our most experienced portal masters and a valued member of my advisory council. Marcus extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Stella shook it. Her grip was firm, and he noticed that her skin was slightly warm, as if she had a mild fever. You are smaller than I expected, she said with apparent surprise. Human stories describe your warriors as being quite large and imposing. I'm not a warrior, Marcus replied. I'm a mechanic. I fix broken machines. Stella tilted her head, clearly puzzled. And yet you offered aid to strangers without thought of reward or personal safety. Is this not the behavior of a warrior? Where I come from, it's just the behavior of a decent person. Stella looked at the Emperor with what Marcus interpreted as amazement. He truly sees kindness as ordinary behavior rather than exceptional virtue. Indeed, the Emperor said, which is why he may be exactly what we need as a bridge between our peoples. A soft chiming sound drew their attention to what Marcus had initially mistaken for a cluster of large flowers at the edge of the platform. As he watched, the flowers began to unfold, revealing themselves to be some sort of transportation device. It looked like a cross between a boat and a large shell with seats that seemed to be grown rather than manufactured. Our transport to the city, Lyra announced. Unless you would prefer to fly, Marcus. Marcus looked at the dragon-shaped shadows moving through the sky around the floating cities. I think I'll stick with the boat shell thing for now. Wisdom, Vera agreed with a grin. Flying with dragons requires significant preparation for humans. The altitude and speed can be quite overwhelming. As they settled into the organic-looking seats, Marcus felt the transport begin to rise smoothly from the platform. There was no sensation of acceleration or mechanical vibration, just a gentle, lifting motion as they ascended toward the nearest floating city. How do these things work? He asked, running his hand along the smooth, pearl-like surface of the seat. They're grown from a symbiotic organism that feeds on ambient magical energy, Stella explained. The transport forms an empathic bond with its passengers and carries them wherever they wish to go within the local area. It reads our minds, not precisely. It senses intention and emotion rather than specific thoughts. You cannot accidentally direct it somewhere dangerous by thinking about the wrong destination. As they rose higher, Marcus got a better view of the city they were approaching. The buildings were unlike anything he had ever seen, appearing to be grown rather than constructed, with flowing lines and organic curves that seemed to follow no earthly architectural principles. Bridges made of what looked like crystallized music connected the structures, and gardens filled with impossible plants provided splashes of color throughout the urban landscape. This is Draconis, the Emperor said, noting Marcus's amazement. Our capital and largest city. It houses approximately 2 million dragons, along with representatives from our allied species. Allied species? Dragons are not the only intelligent beings in this realm, Vera explained. We share our world with several other species, including the crystal singers I mentioned earlier, though their numbers are much reduced now. As their transport approached a landing platform near the center of the city, Marcus saw other beings moving among the dragons. Some appeared to be made of living crystal, their bodies refracting the ambient light into rainbow patterns. Others looked humanoid, but seemed to phase in and out of visibility as if they existed only partially in the same dimension as everything else. The crystal singers, Lyra said, pointing to the crystalline beings. Refugees from their destroyed realm who have found sanctuary here. They possess the ability to manipulate reality through harmonic resonances. And the translucent ones? Shade Walkers, Stella replied. They exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions and serve as scouts and messengers between realms. Their reports have confirmed that hostile forces are indeed probing dimensional barriers throughout this region of the multiverse. Their transport settled onto the landing platform with barely a whisper of sound. As they disembarked, Marcus found himself at the center of considerable attention from the various beings moving through the area. Dragons in human form paused in their activities to stare at him, while crystal singers chimed to each other in harmonies that he could feel as much as hear. Word of your arrival has spread quickly, the Emperor observed. Few humans have ever been seen in our realm, and never under these circumstances. What circumstances exactly? As an honored guest rather than a prisoner, Vera said grimly. The last human visitors were captured while attempting to steal dragon eggs. Their fate was unpleasant. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. How long ago was this? 700 years, the Emperor replied. Though dragon memory is long, and many still view humans with suspicion based on that incident. No pressure, Marcus muttered, noticing that several dragons had moved closer and were openly studying him. Lyra placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Do not worry. Your status as our father's guest provides absolute protection. No one would dare to challenge that, no matter what their personal opinions might be. The Emperor led them through the city streets, which were paved with stones that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Marcus noticed that there were no vehicles of any kind. Dragons simply shifted to their true forms and flew when they needed to travel longer distances, while other beings used various forms of magical transportation. We do not require the kind of mechanical devices that your species has developed, the Emperor explained when Marcus commented on the absence of technology. Our abilities allow us to manipulate reality directly rather than requiring tools to extend our capabilities. They stopped at a building that looked like it had been shaped from a single enormous crystal, its faceted walls reflecting and refracting the city lights into complex patterns. Our guest quarters, Lyra announced. This will be your residence during your visit. The interior of the building was as remarkable as the exterior, with rooms that seemed to reshape themselves according to the needs of their occupants. Marcus found himself in a suite that somehow provided all the amenities of a luxury hotel while maintaining the organic, grown appearance that characterized all dragon architecture. The rooms will adapt to your preferences over time, Stella explained. The structure can sense what makes you comfortable and will adjust temperature, lighting, and even furniture configuration accordingly. That's considerate. We have learned that comfort is essential for proper rest and clear thinking, the Emperor said. Tomorrow you will meet with the Council and begin to understand the true scope of the challenges we face. Tonight, you should rest and allow your mind to process what you have already experienced. Vera moved to a wall that appeared to be made of flowing water and somehow extracted what looked like a bundle of clothing. Garments appropriate to our realm, she said, handing them to Marcus. Your human clothes will function here, but these will be more comfortable and will help you blend in. The clothes felt strange to the touch, softer than silk, but somehow more substantial, with a weight that seemed to shift depending on how he held them. They were cut in a style that reminded him of medieval robes, but with practical modifications that suggested they were designed for actual use rather than ceremony. Tomorrow morning, Lyra and I will take you on a tour of the city, Vera continued. You should see more of our world before meeting with the Council. What exactly is the Council? Marcus asked. Representatives from all the major dragon clans, plus delegates from our allied species, the Emperor explained. They serve as advisors and help coordinate policy across the Empire. Their approval will be necessary if we are to move forward with formal human-dragon relations. And if they don't approve, then we will need to find alternative approaches to the problems we face, the Emperor said diplomatically. But I believe that meeting you in person will help them understand the potential benefits of cooperation. After the others had departed, leaving him alone in the crystal suite, Marcus found himself sitting by a window that looked out over the glowing city. The view was spectacular, with dragons moving through the sky like living constellations and the other floating cities visible in the distance. He tried to process everything that had happened to him in the past few days. Less than a week ago, his biggest concern had been whether he could afford new tires for his truck. Now he was sitting in a crystal palace in another dimension, preparing to meet with a council of dragon lords who would decide whether humans were worthy of alliance against interdimensional threats. The impossibility of it all should have been overwhelming, but somehow Marcus found himself adapting to each new revelation with surprising ease. Perhaps it was his experience as a mechanic. When faced with a complex problem, you gathered information, identified the key components, and worked toward a practical solution. The Dragon Realm presented unique challenges, but the underlying principles remained the same. There were problems that needed solving, people who needed help, and potential solutions that required cooperation and mutual understanding. As he prepared for sleep in a bed that seemed to be made of crystallized moonlight, Marcus found himself thinking about the bigger picture. The Emperor had mentioned forces from other realms that threatened both dragons and humans. If that threat was real, then the question wasn't whether he was qualified to be an ambassador, but whether he could afford not to try. His mechanical training had taught him that when a system was under stress, failure in one component could cascade through the entire mechanism. If hostile forces were indeed probing dimensional barriers, then isolation wouldn't protect anyone for long. Either the various species of the multiverse learned to work together, or they would be conquered separately. It was a sobering thought to fall asleep to, but somehow Marcus found the crystal bed surprisingly comfortable. As consciousness faded, he could hear the distant harmonies of the crystal singers mixing with the soft sounds of dragons moving through the night sky above the city. Tomorrow he would begin to learn whether a simple human mechanic could really serve as a bridge between worlds. But tonight, for the first time in days, he felt like he might actually be equal to the challenge ahead. The next morning brought new wonders and the beginning of his real education in the complexities of interdimensional politics. But that was a story for another day. Tonight, Marcus Thompson slept peacefully in a crystal palace, dreaming of floating cities and dragons who spoke of hope in the face of unimaginable threats. When he woke, his life as an ordinary mechanic would be definitively over, and his career as humanity's first ambassador to the Dragon Empire would begin in earnest. Whether he was ready or not, the fate of two worlds now rested partially in his capable hands.